I'm Gemma Nelson from Tees Valley Sport. I am joined today by Mark Fishpool from You've Got This. We are going to talk about social learning spaces today. You've Got This created their version of social learning space called The Exchange. Mark, would you like to go into a little bit around what social learning spaces means for you?
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. So, the social learning space that we created, as you said, is The Exchange. What we've actually used our wider partnership structure as a place where people come together, learn from each other, discuss the work that's going on, and how they're making a difference, rather than a traditional kind of partnership, which was much more based on accountability and really looking at sets of, outputs and outcomes and how we were achieving them. So we've created a very different space to what people would normally think of when they think of a programme partnership.
Thank you very much for that. So what we're going to do is just dive into the challenges, the impact and the value of the exchange and what that's created. So I've got a few questions. So the first one being, what was the moment or the problem that made you think you need to do something different?
Yeah, well, when we set off in 2018, all 12 of what were then called the LDPs were asked by Sport England to try and do things differently. I think it's fair to say that none of us really knew what different was, and it was very, very exploratory at the time, which was really exciting, but of course quite challenging as well. And when we first started out, we had a partnership that was probably modelled on other partnerships that had gone before. Mm-hmm. So very formal, with a chair, a long set of terms of reference, and very much focused on, I suppose, accountability. Mm-hmm. So what was the work, how was it progressing, were outcomes being achieved? And probably about a year in, as we grew in confidence as a programme, the programme team particularly started to question about whether, if we were going to do things differently, you could do that if you had a governance structure which was kind of very traditional. And I think there's some learning in that already, because often when we start out on a piece of work, on a programme, we want to jump through all the governance structure, because that's not the most exciting bit. Doing the work's the exciting bit. So we tend to create something that looks like something we've always had.
Yeah.
And then somehow we expect things to then be different. So about a year in, there was this kind of understanding that we needed to rethink what that partnership structure looked like, and move away from a traditional model, which was based on accountability, and start to just explore something different that was much more about building relationships and learning. And I think at the time, no one would have said we were creating some kind of learning space. But ultimately, that's what happened.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, in terms of that space, who was it created for?
So, one of the things that we were clear from the outset was that if we were going to do something differently and really kind of get alongside that vision of the LDPs, of systemic change around physical activity, then it was going to have to be much more than just what we might term the usual suspects.
Yeah.
So we'd always been clear that it was very much an open partnership. Although people were invited into the space because we knew they had something to give, it was always designed to be a place where really any organisation, and we were talking about organisations, this wasn't a community level space, say for residents, there were other forums that did that. This was very much bringing together organisations who were either already valuing physical activity in their work, or were starting to ask questions about whether physical activity could add value to the work that they were doing. So it was really working with those existing organisations who'd come into what we called the Programme Delivery Partnership. Mm-hmm. And there was a name that was going to kill innovation from the start. And that was my idea, so I'm responsible for that. And brought them in and started to work with them about how it could be different.
Yeah. And I suppose when you started out, did you have an idea of what success would look like, or was it very much just that experiment and see where you kind of get to?
So it was very experimental, and that was quite exciting. I think if we were going to judge success, we would have said at the time that we were going to measure success by what it wasn't rather than what it was. So we knew we didn't want something where the programme team came along to the meeting and people in the room sort of scrutinised the work that they were doing and kind of left them with a lot of actions at the end of it. This had to be something where the people who came into the room were coming there because they wanted to see change in their own organisations as well, and that ultimately it was about what happened outside the room, not what happened inside it. And a key element of that was then really kind of the idea of introducing it as a learning space, because that's the thing that shifts it away from accountability. We're coming along to, to scrutinise what you've done and then tell you what you should be doing next, into we want to know about how the work is going, what our role is in it, and how we can then take away what is being learned here and put that into our own context and our own organisations.
Brilliant. So in terms of, you touched on the kind of organisations you look to invite, how did you get them to engage with this space, but also how did you make it feel safe, open and different, like you say, more of a learning space rather than a space for accountability?
Yeah, so initially we thought that could be quite challenging, because most people have been involved in a more traditional accountability structure. I think the first thing was there was a lot of reinforcement of the messaging. Sport England had been clear that this was about learning. The programme was about learning. So that's a massive advantage, because you've effectively got that top cover from Sport England who are saying, we want to use this as an opportunity to learn how things might be different. And their own behaviours were modelling that. So their relationship with each LDP reflected that kind of learning culture. So key parts of it were about understanding the processes that we're going through, not just the outcomes. So that puts you in a very strong position because you're getting a clear message from the funder that that's their expectation. I think what we found was a lot of the people who were in the room at the time really welcomed that, because it was a real breath of fresh air. So a lot of the people who we were engaging with were already thinking the same way. A lot of them are from VCS organisations or from public sector organisations, and were feeling very constrained by the ways in which so much of the work that we all do is just driven by outputs, and we've all seen outputs achieved, but where's the long-term change? So we were dealing with a lot of people who actually wanted to embrace things differently. Now, of course, not everybody does, and it is fair to say along the way, a few people have fallen out of that partnership, but the door's always open for them to come back and engage again. But ultimately, we needed to create a coalition of the willing. So the people that we wanted in the room were there because they wanted to be there, not because they needed to. And of course that means sometimes you haven't got people you would really like, but we just have to move with that, but always keeping that door open for people to come back at a point in time when they feel comfortable to. And in terms of creating a safe space, some of that is about the honesty and openness of the team. So I felt, bear in mind at the time, I was a partner organisation. I wasn't part of You've Got This as a core team. I was one of the key partner organisations, Middlesbrough Environment City. And it was about the team modelling the behaviours. So they were honest and open about what was going on and what was working and setting those kind of basic ground rules. We also changed got away from terms of reference, detailed terms of reference. So the partnership was involved in creating the new vision statement, Active Lives as a Way of Life. So that was an engagement process and an agreed process about how we did that. So that helped to set a very different culture within the partnership. But also then we kind of threw out some of the traditional ways of working. So the terms of reference went, and the chair went.
Right, okay.
Actually, with their agreement,
obviously.
With their agreement, we replaced the terms of reference with a pledge. So all that we asked people to do to be part of the partnership was to say how they, within their organisations, would look to build a value of physical activity. And then we created a set of values about the way that we worked, and they were agreed with the partnership. So you're kind of replacing an awful lot of rhetoric with a much tighter, shorter set of values that were much more about enabling people to think within the space and work in a different way. And they become then very visible examples of how you're wanting to work. And you start to shift that kind of purpose. And of course within those values is very much about honesty, transparency, learning, the fact that we're all on the journey together. This isn't just a programme that's a group of people are going to deliver something. This is about how all of us together are going to work to create a greater value of physical activity in our place. So I think it was far less tricky than everyone thought it would be.
Right, okay, interesting.
The fact that so many people were embracing it.
Yeah.
I think losing some people from that because it wasn't the sort of space that they felt comfortable in.
Right.
You're never going to feel comfortable about that happening because you want to be inclusive and you want people in the room. But you're always mindful of the fact that door's always open, so people come back in. I think there was a challenge in bringing some people into that partnership. So what the team were doing is they were looking regularly at who was in the room and who else might be able to add value. And sometimes bringing in some of the partners into that structure was quite hard. So part of that then is about how you communicate with people as well who can't come into the space.
Right,
or
okay.
don't come into the space.
Yeah.
So you have to think about how you create other relationships with people who aren't comfortable coming into something. And I think that's a particular issue where people are in a culture that's very focused on delivery, because you kind of come into there and it's not what you're expecting sometimes. You know, and if you're very focused on your work and what you have to achieve, which a lot of people are, because under a lot of pressure to get things done, then it might feel that that's not a space that's a valuable use of your time.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for those people who do come along, they actually are able to come into that space, learn, contribute, and take something back that actually adds value to the work that they're doing.
No, that's perfect. And if you were to do it again, and you accept another one, is there anything you would do differently?
Hindsight's great, isn't it? Isn't it a wonderful thing? Yeah. So I think if we were in another place and we were setting this up, I mean, rule number one, of course, is there's no transplant, only translate.
Yes.
So never ever take something from another place and just try and replicate it. Think about what it means for your place. What's valuable, what isn't. I think doing it sooner would have just saved a lot of time. Would have saved a lot of time. But I think that the key takeaways for us were that you have to put in place the structure in the partnership and the culture early on. So we were fortunate in that so many people wanted to do things differently, but really we lost a lot of time by creating something that looked like everything else that had happened. But that's the learning in itself, isn't it?
Definitely.
You know, and that's the bit where people who are doing it now could say, oh yeah, okay, let's not set up something, you know, let's take time to think about what the governance should be. So an example of that locally is we're very much involved as part of the Healthy Weight Declaration in both Middlesbrough and Redcar and Cleveland. And as part of that, it's about setting up a Healthy Weight Alliance. Now that hasn't happened yet. So firstly, that's about taking the time to think about what you need to have, but then also starting to think about this relational way of working. So let's not create a Healthy Weight Alliance that's just people come into the room, they go away again and just get on with what they've done, and they see that the team at Public Health as being the people that are delivering, because that's not going to happen. You know, we're not going to create a place that values healthy weight. If we do that, it's more of this relational way of working. So, in answer to your question, yeah, I think if we'd recognised it sooner, that would have been great.
Yeah.
But probably for us, we had to go through that process to really understand why we needed something that was different, and why we needed something that was very much about bringing people together with sort of a mindset of transparency and honesty and learning rather than accountability.
Thank you very much. And I suppose on the result of creating the exchange, and it's been going how long now?
Well, it was created around about 2019-20.
Right, okay.
It's a little bit of a bumpy bit because of COVID, of course, and it really flourished as we came out of COVID.
Yeah.
Part of that, of course, was, in a way, COVID created those conditions. People were desperate to meet.
To be involved.
They were desperate just to talk.
Yeah.
So that actually helped in the longer term. Again, that helped
Seemed
us.
to help, yeah.
So really, since 2021, it's really kind of driven forward.
And I suppose in that time, what changes have you seen as a result of that? So in people, relationships, or ways of working?
So, I mean, one of the things that we actually did when we came out of COVID is that's when we really had the opportunity to change the structure of the meetings, and a big focus of it was about people sharing. So we introduced things like what we call speed updating, which is the opportunity for people just to speak one-to-one in those meetings and create the space for that, and then also to have members of the exchange presenting and leading tasks. So not the team always at the front.
Yeah.
What we've seen out of it, I mean, perhaps the single biggest benefit I would say that we've had is it's facilitated our commissioning approach. So over the last 5 or 6 years, we have commissioned a lot of work, and we've used a technique called collaborative commissioning, which is different to traditional commissioning because it's based on insight, but it's not prescriptive in terms of what you're asking for. And what we've been able to do because of the exchange is create the conditions for people to collaborate and come together to pull together those commissions. So rather than having a very traditional tendering process where you kind of say what you want and people competitively bid for it, what we've done is we've created an insight base based on what we and our partners have seen in communities or in certain groups, and then brought our exchange members, who we call ambassadors, together to actually create a response to that. So that's a very, very different process, and it's been possible because we've got the exchange. But also from a commissioning point of view, the exchange is a necessity for that. We can only do it because we've got the exchange. The other unexpected benefit that we saw from that is once the commission has been formed, the partnerships formed and the commissions happened, we're finding now that the commission projects are being much more open and transparent with us about what is and isn't working.
Yeah.
So the kind of learning approach that we've developed in the exchange and then done through this kind of open commissioning process then transfers across into the commissioned project.
Yeah.
So there's, I mean, it's not going to happen in every case, is it? But for the most part, people are not fearful anymore of being open and honest about things that haven't worked.
Yeah.
And that's what we want.
Which is what you want, yeah.
Because the last thing we want to do is somebody to go away for 3 years and try to say it's all been wonderful when it clearly hasn't.
Yeah.
You know, we want that learning to come through all the time so that we can adapt and change the commission to get the best result.
Yeah.
Beyond that, that's a sort of a negative thing, isn't it, in a way? On the positive side, it also means that where there are things that have come out, positive things that have come out of commissions that we weren't expecting, we're able to share them.
Yeah.
So, for example, changing the Creative Active Schools framework to something that is more relevant locally has been a key learning point that came out of that commission, which will build sustainability into that programme moving forward.
If one of my places, for example, came to you and said they were curious about setting up a similar space, but they're not sure where to start, what would your advice be to them?
That's a good question. I think that there's an element of courage in it, because it is different.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and it's often not what people are expecting. But if we're going to be serious about really tackling physical inactivity in our place, we have to be courageous.
Yeah.
And we have to stand up and be different. In my mind, there's no point in setting off the way we always have and then sort of trying to hope change will happen as we go along.
Yeah.
We kind of have to make that statement of change early on. And I think from our experience, and hopefully this will be true in other places, is because we were very surprised at the buy-in that we got when we came along and said we want to do it differently.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people out there working in organisations who know that doing things the way we always have isn't going to change anything.
No. Yeah.
And that actually we're better off taking a punt on doing something
Than just doing
differently than just carrying on. If we carry on the way that we always have, well, we'll get what we've always got, and change won't happen. And it does need that positive challenge, because you're not coming into the space and saying, oh, that hasn't worked. You're coming in and saying, look, let's be more collaborative. You know, let's learn from what's happened before and build learning front and centre of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And let's show some leadership ourselves and just try something different. Just try and do, you know, work in a different way. But to come back to one of the earlier points, and it's something I thought a lot about in my previous job as well, where I was chairing 2 or 3 partnership boards, is that how you set up a governance structure for a piece of work isn't something that you should just rush through because you want to get on and do the work.
Yes.
It defines what the work will be and how that work will happen.
Yeah.
So if we set up a structure that's based on accountability, you will create a whole body of work that sits around being accountable. That's not to say because people aren't accountable for what they do, because they are, but it's a very different form of accountability because it's collective. And really taking the time to think through that structure and the culture of a partnership and what it's there to achieve is worth the investment of time. And then when you do start on that journey, it's about being clear that what you create in the first place will probably evolve.
Yeah.
You know, our collaborative commissioning process evolves now. We've been doing it for 4 years, and every time you do it, you learn something new, and you allow it to evolve and change. And that's true of the partnership as well. So, similarly, creating a structure which is set in stone isn't ideal either.
Yeah.
It is about that constant reviewing with the partnership and using the learning that's coming out of it to constantly evolve and change in response to what you see.
Brilliant. And finally, if you could bottle one ingredient that makes a social learning space work, what would it be?
I've got one, but it's probably actually several all mashed up together. So I would use the word honesty and openness. And the kind of bit that then says, well, it's more than one thing really, is recognising that that's on the part of everybody, and it's right the way through the kind of system on that.
Yeah.
So there's an honesty from the team. Yeah. So we come into the exchange with that sense of openness, and we expect that and get that from the wider partnership.
Yeah.
So they respect our honesty, and then in return there's an honesty in that. But equally that has to work through the system. So as I said at the beginning of our chat, Sport England came to us very much saying, we want to know what does and doesn't work. We want honesty in this. We don't want like it's all been a bed of roses when it hasn't. If that relationship wasn't there, it would be very difficult to create that in the actual local place. So, you know, if this was another programme, you'd need to have that same relationship with whoever's funding the work.
Yeah.
So it is about honesty and openness, because if you want to learn together, you have to feel that you can trust other people when you say things that, you know, well, that didn't quite go the way we thought. And so having that right the way through the structure. So I suppose trust is the other word. Since you asked for one, I've given you three now.
Thank you.
Trust, openness and honesty is kind of crucial if you want that structure to work.
Yeah.
And that can be quite fragile. So if people come into that space and then they're doing, you know, kind of trying to make it about accountability, that could be quite damaging quite quickly. So it's much more about the whole culture and how that partnership works together.